Good afternoon and welcome to a very special webinar. Think Realty and Avail are proud to bring you today's webinar, Becoming a Digital Landlord, What Landlords Need to Know About Managing Properties During and After COVID-19. Before we begin, we have a legal disclaimer. Good afternoon and welcome to a very special webinar. Think Realty and Avail are proud to be regarded as financial or legal advice. Be sure to consult qualified financial or legal professionals to verify any information. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to our friends over at Avail for partnering with us on this webinar. My name is Rodney, and I am the Director of Sales for Think Realty. Think Realty is a member-based education platform for real estate investors. Our passion is to help investors throughout their career with investing strategies, business management, networking, and so much more. We do that through many avenues, including a monthly magazine, our website, educational videos, our Think Realty podcast, the Think Realty events, and so much more. If you're not already a member, you can sign up at thinkrealty.com/join. That's thinkrealty.com/join. This gives you access to our entire site and incredible discounts from our partners such as 50% off Sherwin-Williams paints and so many more. So check that out today. I also wanted to let you know that we have two events coming up. Our Atlanta event is September 19th and 20th, and our Baltimore event is coming up on October 24th and 25th. Both of these events will be hybrid events. If you want to attend in person, you can do that. If you're not comfortable with attending in person, that is fine too. The entire event will be virtual, so you have the choice on how you attend, but you definitely want to attend. You can purchase your tickets at thinkrealty.com. We actually created a special promo code to get you a discount on your tickets just for attending today's webinar. Put in the code AVAIL. That's promo code AVAIL, AVAIL, to get your discounted tickets to either the Atlanta event, the Baltimore event, or better yet, attend both events. With that, let's get started with our webinar. The presenter today is Lawrence Jankolo. He is the co-founder of Avail and an active real estate investor. Let's turn it over to Lawrence.
I want to thank Rodney and the team at Think Realty for helping us put together this webinar. It's been really great working with them. Certainly appreciate the efforts. Today, we'll discuss what you as a landlord need to know during and after the COVID-19 health crisis and as things move forward. We'll discuss what it means to be a digital landlord given those situations and what will happen. A lot has changed and is likely to stay changed. So, it's important now, even more than ever, that we as landlords adapt to ensure the success of our businesses and that we can continue to care for the well-being of our tenants. So today, the agenda is going to include a discussion on COVID-19 on the rental market, the effects it's had. We'll go over a few data points and trends, which I think will transition nicely into the second topic here about becoming a digital landlord. I'm hoping that we can talk about what it means to be a digital landlord, and then certainly discuss some of the most important elements that it takes to be a digital landlord, and I think we'll have some good tips for you and how to accomplish those things. And then third, I think I want to talk about managing money. Becoming a digital landlord is more than just collecting rent online. There's a whole bunch of other things that you'll want to figure out as you think about how you manage the money for your business. And hopefully there's a few additional tools and tips and tricks that we can get out of that. And then the last item here, but certainly not the least, is I want to have a discussion on finding community. Especially now as we find that we're even more isolated than ever. There are a lot of investment groups nationwide that can't meet in person and everyone's going online. So I think it is important to keep in touch with other investors to learn and grow. So finding community online should be something that's part of becoming a digital landlord. So let's just jump straight into the first topic, the effects of COVID-19 on the rental market and landlords and renters. I think certainly there's no debate. COVID-19 has deeply impacted the real estate industry across the board. We're seeing people involved in purchasing, managing properties, moving, even building and construction. The entire industry has been impacted. For today's discussion specifically, though, I think we'll just focus on the rental industry here, and the things about landlords and tenants and those relationships. So I want to start off with several trends that we've seen that have emerged this year. The first being that people have been moving less in general. We're seeing that tenants are instead opting to either renew their lease, and in a lot of cases just agreeing to go month to month for the time being until things seem to calm down and more clarity comes in. This is partly due to fear about doing in-person tours during the pandemic, especially while it's peaking in some states. But it's also, I think, generally because of fear of instability in their own jobs. Unemployment's continuing to rise, and I think there's just a lot of fear there. What we are seeing is this has somewhat shifted the moving season by a month or two. What is traditionally an April to September season, we're seeing actually a lot more
Bring you
activity
today's
had
webinar.
peaked in May and June, and we predict the moving season will now continue through October and has definitely offset it by a month or two, which is fine if you were looking to stay put, but it's actually not so great for people who were looking to move, as available inventory in the market is now limited and shifted in timing, and now you have to juggle that timing strain. A second trend, and somewhat related to the above, is that moving has become more complicated. Renters aren't simply able to just go visit an apartment anymore. Now showings need to be heavily coordinated with the current tenants, a showing agent or landlord. Everyone needs to wear masks and respect social distancing. And those are all great things to do during a pandemic, but it makes the showing really hard, and takes what was previously a very simple in-person showing to something now that is a lot harder to coordinate. And this has caused a lot of landlords to adopt virtual showings, which we can discuss later on as well. Related to that still also is the vacation rental or short-term rental market. If you're in that industry, you've probably felt the most pain out of any real estate industry. I think that includes, hotels to some extent in there, but it's certainly been documented in the news quite a lot that there are so many travel restrictions that people's decisions to travel are really decreasing, and has put a huge impact on the short-term rental space. Many short-term rentals saw 90% or more declines in their business almost overnight. I think we're also seeing that a lot of short-term rental owners, if they have the kind of place that accommodates it, are shifting their business model back to longer stay rentals, and others are looking to sell while they can. So we're definitely seeing a lot of change there in the short-term space as well. And one of the big changes that we've seen for this season is the rental market has shifted, where tenants have a lot more reliance now on government stimulus and the unemployment benefits to pay their rent, which makes sense given what's happening. It's just, you put the source of income is now coming from a completely uncommon source for them. The U.S. economy saw a massive tidal wave of unemployment claims, which no one was prepared for during the early onset of the COVID-19 crisis. A lot of that has smoothed out now, but there's definitely a lot of cause for concern for rent payments as they move forward, as stimulus either ends or gets renewed. There's a lot of uncertainty around what's going to happen with rent. And perhaps the final trend of 2020 is contactless. We've seen it in other industries. Grocery stores are dropping things off contactless. There's a huge move there, and the same is happening in the rental market as well. And so that's something to keep an eye out for savvy landlords. If you can figure out how to do showings contactless or payments contactless, then you'll be ahead of the curve. It just shows how even now more than ever, renters and landlords need to take necessary precautions to remain safe, especially moving forward after the COVID-19 crisis has abated. What's been happening with rent payments is something that we've been following closely. Specifically, we've been tracking if landlords are receiving rent each month. And our research has shown that landlords are reporting a higher amount of rent is going unpaid each month. But this appears to be mostly true as, earlier in the month. And as the month continues, it does appear that many tenants then do work to pay off that rent. So really the shift has been moving towards tenants paying rent a bit late, likely as they're waiting for stimulus or unemployment benefits to kick in. We're just seeing a slight shift. So, it's not normal or average now that the rent is paid on the 1st or 5th. We're seeing it get pushed out by a couple of weeks each month in a lot of cases. Even in July, we saw the largest increase over the last 3 months of landlords saying that didn't collect their full 100% of rents. Only 45% of landlords reported receiving all of their rent for July. Another 60% of landlords reporting receiving all of it for May and June. So we're seeing it's come down a bit, even continued. It's likely that this number will improve as more tenants pay their balance for the remainder of the month, but we're definitely seeing there's a trend to receiving less rent as the stimulus stuff starts to dry up. So much of the rent payment trends right now are uncertain because of some of the big factors like stimulus programs and unemployment. So, if you are kind of in a weird spot where you don't know what's happening and you want to stay up to date as these things progress real time, certainly, join the Avail blog called The Landing, and, keep an eye out for future articles as these things move and as the situation changes is a good way to stay up to date on this. With additional mounting job loss, coming in at record rates, and even despite some of the government stimulus packages, we are seeing many tenants are finding it difficult to pay their rent, and wanted to kind of go through some of those numbers with you. What we're seeing is that roughly 66% of tenants reported facing challenges paying rent in June, 62% in July, so it's come down a bit, but we see that it still hasn't really improved much for tenants across the country as the months are coming. Here, when we look at tenants and whether they're able to pay rent, we're seeing that 30% of tenants needed government aid or assistance. Another 30% of tenants needed to borrow cash or take out a loan. And roughly 20% needed to find extra work or new work in order to pay rent. And while payment plans are helpful in breaking up rent payments, tenants are still needing to rely on stimulus money, borrowing cash, or finding extra work in order to pay their rent. And I think, moving forward without the economy back open 100%, this is very much likely to continue as a trend, as many just simply are unable to find suitable work to be able to cover their living costs. That said, landlords do need to find ways to minimize losses, and we do recommend working closely with tenants, setting up flexible payment plans or even providing some rent relief as a plan that you customize with your tenants can really go a long way, and keep those lines of communication open so that you know what's ahead of you. You definitely don't want to be blindsided by these things. So this is a great opportunity to be talking with your tenants and working with them directly. So let's maybe change subjects a little bit here and start talking about what it means to be a digital landlord, maybe even what digital landlording is. First things first, digital landlording is more than just taking rent payments online. It's really about leveraging online tools and apps in a way to better systematize your business, help you be more effective and efficient with your time, stay more organized with contracts and agreements, and then hopefully, ideally, save you time so that your passive investments and passive income is truly more passive. I think we all went into this thinking that this is going to be great passive income, and we realized there's a lot more work to be done here than we thought. But going digital allows you to try to get back to that passive state. And certainly in today's age, everyone is expecting things to be online and digital now. Everyone expects that they'll have receipts for any transactions, or they'll have 24/7 online access to their lease agreements. People are expecting to pay rent online. So, now more than ever, digital is kind of a requirement. It's not necessarily a nice to have anymore. I think it's something we all have to do. And of course, it means that we are working smarter as well. So there's benefits besides just meeting your tenants' expectations. We can use data from apps to do better decision making, things like figuring out how much rent to charge, those kinds of things. And then one thing that's super important in today's environment is, as a digital landlord, a lot of that face-to-face contact that's all throughout real estate is just less necessary and maybe less frequent than it needs to be. Certainly I'm an advocate for meeting my tenants in person. It's a contract you're signing, it's a long-term contract. So I generally do like meeting them in person, but at least if you're digital, you can bring that frequency down quite a bit, with things like digital showings, automatic payments. All those things allow you to keep your distance and maybe just, when the pandemic is over, it's not necessarily about keeping distance anymore. It does allow you to be more efficient and effective with your time as well. So let's talk about some of the things that you can do as you move digital. Certainly advertising your rental can be as simple as putting up a for rent sign in the yard. But honestly, if you want to get your property in front of as many potential tenants as possible, then there's more that you have to do, and going digital is the best way. There's only so many people that will walk by your property, but if you can get your listing online, you open yourself up to a lot broader of a market. So now, having a solid digital strategy for marketing your listings is your best way to maximize your chances of finding, the best tenants. And honestly, it's going to save you a ton of time as well. So here's some of the things you'll need to give your listing the most chance of finding the best tenants while saving time. First, determine the market rate for rent in your neighborhood for your type of property. You want to assess the property and determine the rent based on similar units in the area, recent upgrades, any amenities, and all of that data exists online and easy to do by viewing other homes on sites like Zumper or Zillow or anywhere else that you see rental listings. Of course, if you want to be extra sure, you can spend $20 and get a really in-depth analysis of your property from Avail using our rent analysis tool. And that goes into a lot of depth around what your property should rent for and giving you comparables and really taking a look at the averages in the neighborhood for 1, 2, or 3 bedrooms. Next, once you've established kind of what you want to rent the property for, you'll want to write a very compelling rental listing. Because there are so many listings out on the internet now, that rental listing description and title has to be really clear and highlight things that tenants care about and things that they're looking for. So certainly it makes it easier if your description or title immediately has the rent amount, as that's a popular filter item, the number of beds and baths, and maybe even then just include the best feature of the property so that you can kind of set yourself apart from others. And then once you've done that, you don't need to be afraid to include other details. Sometimes when we are non-digital, we're worried about paying by the word for a classified ad or how much can be held on a yard sign, but that's not the case online. You can write as much detail in your listing as you want, and tenants are looking for those details. It really helps them remember the listing and ultimately contact you. And then, of course, all of that's great, but you also really need impressive photos now more than ever. That's one of the filter criteria that tenants use, both in a technical sense, but also in a practical sense. On a technical side, there is typically a filter where they can exclude listings that don't have photos. And then, of course, on a practical side, they'll read the description, but they'll base their decision on what they see in the photos. And so, you really want to take high quality photos of the major parts of the property. And in some of the major rooms, like the kitchen, for instance, or bathrooms, you might want to take multiple photos of those and set those photos up nicely. You don't want it to be dirty or cluttered. If you can tidy up before you take the photos, turn on all the lights, open all the blinds. That's really important so that the photos you take make the property look great. Obviously, if you have a newer iPhone or smartphone, that's going to give you a really high quality camera to do this with. And if you don't, it's probably worth the investment of hiring a professional photographer. I think you can do that for $100 to $200 per unit to take professional photos, and then you have them for the life of the property. So photos are going to be super important. Then kind of the next thing you want to do is you are creating this listing and these photos. Now what's important is where it goes. And I think this is the most important aspect of becoming a digital landlord, because you want to send your listing to places online that tenants are going to be at. It's not the yard sign out front that tenants are going to find you by anymore. They're on sites like Zillow or HotPads or apartments.com. And so you're going to want to get your listing there. And then start thinking about how your listing will appear on a phone or on social media or on one of those other sites, so that you can start to put yourself in your renter's shoes and think critically about your listing and what is at the top of that listing as they appear on those various sites. And speaking of those various sites, obviously you want to be maximizing the pool of potential tenants you're reaching. So you really want to be posting to sites where tenants are looking, as I said, like Zumper or apartments.com, Zillow, realtor.com. And you can go and list directly to each of those websites. But honestly, and not just to plug our service, but it does make the most sense to use some sort of service that can take your listing that you create once and push it out to all of those different sites simultaneously, so you're not having to create 10, 15 listings on your own. And then, of course, so this is something maybe some of the veteran landlords and myself might shudder at, but it's somewhat important now to share your listing to Facebook and other social media as well. This will get your friends and family talking about it, and you might find a connection there, but also people are looking at these things now on Facebook. This wasn't the case several years ago, but now people are looking for rentals on Facebook. And then one thing to mention here is, during this pandemic, it probably is a good idea to mention that you're a contactless landlord. Going digital allows you to do this, so you can mention to tenants who are looking for more information that there might be a virtual showing that they can look at, or a video you took. Yeah, I think it's also a selling point now to let your tenants know that you have an entirely contactless system in place, from the tenant screening, doing digital rental applications, to the lease that gets signed online, to them paying their rent, not having to, write a check and lick an envelope and send it to you. These are all perks now for both them and you as a landlord. And I think it's important to put that in your listing, or at least when you're talking with tenants on the phone the first time, or email, to mention that, hey, look, I'm a contactless landlord, because it's better, safer, and more effective. There's no reason to not let them know. And certainly, after this webinar, we'll email out the slide deck, which will include a couple additional links around syndicating listings, and some of our other articles around how to write really good listing descriptions and how to take photos. So we'll include those. To really stand out even further, leverage the tools to allow tenants to schedule showings without having to take on all of the phone calls, text messages, emails to try to coordinate those things. Best way to do this is try to use some sort of calendar tool or calendar app that lets you say which available times you have, and let tenants choose from those available spots, so that exactly what times they're picking, because you're the one who set aside what they can do, and then you don't have to have a lot of that going back and forth with them. Are you available at 2? Am I available at 2, etc. This can all be kind of automated with some sort of app. Certainly Avail can do that for you, but there are a whole bunch of other tools for free that you can find online that will do that. But it will tremendously save time for you to not have to go back and forth asking if someone's available on a certain day and time. You just let them pick. And then when you're showing the units, obviously you want to try, especially today, but even in the future, if you can, show units virtually when it's possible. There are certainly many video platforms that work for both you and the tenant, where you can just do a direct one-on-one, like a Skype, FaceTime, Zoom, or Facebook call. You can definitely create virtual tours. And then one of the ways to think about this is treat this as you would any other in-person tour. Walk through the rooms, explain it, ask them if they want to see any rooms again, and then go back into the room, and try to just be their virtual legs and eyes for them, and let them try to direct where to go. And then ask the tenant questions as you're going, so you can kind of gauge what they're looking for. They can also then try to gauge if this is going to meet their needs, maybe even try to visualize how they might use the space. Sometimes questions can probe in a good way. And then, if this is a new rental for you and you're not really sure about the demand or what kind of rent price, this is still a good time to ask tenants questions, because you can get a sense for what are the things they like or don't like. If you ask, what do you think of the appliances, or what do you think of the countertops, you can kind of get a sense for, do they like them, do they not like them, are they thinking about it? And then you can maybe even create a priority list for enhancements in the future just by asking questions. Of course, that's not the purpose of this particular first meeting. You want to just show them in place and let them see if they like it or not, but you can always get that side benefit there. The other thing that you can do too is send photos and a floor plan ahead of time to accompany the virtual tour, so that as you're going through it, they can kind of sense the layout through the floor plan. But one of the big things that people want to know is, does the floor plan work for them? And when they're in person, it's easy to understand, but if someone else is holding the camera and moving around, it's hard. So sometimes a floor plan is a really good way to assist in that. And then, of course, you want to practice safely and do this for safety when you're doing the showings. So if you are going to do in-person showings, then you want to communicate any of the rules you have up front, with, especially during the pandemic that's going on. Do you want, if you're allowing it, you can let them know that they must wear masks, they must sanitize on their way in, that you limit the number of people, that come in on a certain number of tours, or it's one in, one out kind of thing, and that you practice social distancing. Let them know all of those things, that they feel confident and safe coming to view the place, but also the existing tenant who might still be living there feels safe too, that everyone is wearing a mask and keeping their hands to themselves and disinfecting. It's great for the prospective tenant as well as your existing tenants, and then obviously you as well. After the showings, the tools extend to digital applications. And you want to have digital applications. You want records to be digital so that there's no paper being passed back and forth. Particularly during the pandemic, you want to keep sanitary, so you don't want to be passing things back and forth that can get infected. But just even for the future, if you're trying to future-proof, paper is not a very sophisticated means or safe means of transmitting data. Paper is often lost. It can be read by others. Whereas digital gives both you and your tenants a huge sense of control and safety, because those things are so much harder to lose to unsuspecting people. So digital is the better way to go anyway, even if there wasn't a pandemic, just for the security that you get. And then obviously there's time savings for it as well. Being able to have a tenant do an online application either at the end of the showing or soon after the showing has such a huge time savings. And then they can take that application and share it with other landlords if they want. So you can really save time for the tenant as well. And then, if necessary, still after the showings and after rental application, if there's additional questions, let them continue to ask questions. So you can set up a separate screening phone call if you want. We'll go back and forth via email, but they'll often have questions as they're thinking about the place afterwards, and you want to be available. So part of being a digital landlord is giving them the means to contact you, whether that's through phone or email, text. Make sure you have those ready to go. As we mentioned on this previous slide here, there are definitely best practices when processing rental applications, and those haven't changed just because you're going digital or because there's a pandemic. You still want to practice a lot of these things. You want to have a consistent way that you screen tenants. You want to have a source for a lot of the data that you want to get on tenants. So if they're authorizing your credit report, you should know where you're going to get that from. And there's a few enhancements by having a completely digital means, right? It's fast, it's instant, it's consistent, which keeps you compliant with landlord-tenant screening laws, so you're not treating different tenants differently. And it really helps with communication as well. So you want to practice all those best practices, but bring them online. And so that way it kind of smooths everything out for you. Okay, and then moving on, digital leases are another great way for landlords to be contactless with their tenants. Both parties can review and sign the lease from the comfort of their own homes without meeting in person, no handling of pens or shifting paper back and forth. And then obviously there's time optimization here. You're not having to have, someone print out a lease and bring it to you and sign it in front of you, or scan it and email it to you. And the digital signature is saved permanently. So even if every party lost their paper lease, you still have a permanent record for this, and it makes it easy for your tenants to know what rules they're supposed to be following. It makes it easy for you to find the lease when you need to bring it up and have a discussion with them on something. Another advantage of digital leases as you're thinking about moving to being an online landlord is that digital leases are much easier to stay up to date with changing regulations and laws. Previously when I started, I had a lawyer draft my first lease for me and paid a lot of money for it. But that very next year, it was already out of date because regulations had changed. And I didn't want to have to keep paying a lawyer $200 to $500 every year to re-review it and update it. If you're leveraging some sort of service like Avail, you know that every single time you're drafting a new lease, it's been updated for changing regulations and been refreshed for that year. So huge advantages there just in process, knowing that what you're working with is updated every year. Okay, and then here, one of the smartest choices I think landlords can make, particularly today, is to start collecting rent online. As visible on the slide, a contactless bank-to-bank and ACH transfer continue to be very popular form of rent payment for tenants. Tenants don't want to have to go to a checkbook, write out their checks, and send it to you. It's actually kind of a hassle. And we've seen from surveys we've done in the past that one of the reasons tenants are late is because they just can't find their checkbook, or they forgot, or they need to order a new checkbook and now they're late and they just can't get it to you. But if you go digital, it's, you're just giving them more options and making it easier for them to pay. And if it's easy for them to pay, they're more likely to pay. So there's definitely a huge benefit to be gained out of setting up an online rent collection system. And your tenants prefer it too. They want to pay online, just like they pay every other bill online. not to keep harping on it even more, but every landlord should really be using some sort of system for online contactless rent collection to minimize risks. It's faster, it's more secure. You're not having to have tenants have their bank account routing number on little pieces of paper and sending them to you. Online payments are definitely becoming the norm, even in real estate. And then obviously, contactless online payments remove that need to, send checks in the mail, lick the envelopes, meet in person, and all those other interactions that traditionally go along with paying rent that in today's environment might feel unsafe with a pandemic going on. And obviously, all the search trends show that tenants are looking for ways to pay their rent, even if their landlords don't allow it. We find that tenants go searching for different ways to get around this and pay online, which means just as a landlord, you have a huge opportunity to stand out beyond just with your property by offering some sort of contactless online payments. I mean, the benefit to tenants is that it offers the flexibility that they need. Platforms like Avail allow tenants to pay by bank account or ACH transfer. They can pay with a credit card or debit card. Really, any way that's convenient for them, they can pay, which makes it convenient for you in that same way. And then, of course, any kind of online payment allows their tenants to set up automatic payments so they can avoid late fees, make sure the rent's paid on time every month. And we've certainly found that with our own landlords and tenants, where their tenants have enrolled in auto pay through Avail, that they're 5 times more likely to get their rent on time. So there's huge benefits to both parties by having a digital system. Okay, this next thing here on maintenance, keeping up with maintenance is important for your property and your tenants. And it's smart to start handling maintenance digitally where you can. Through platforms like Avail, tenants can submit maintenance requests, photos, and messages to their landlords, and landlords can keep track of those maintenance requests, receipts, and records all digitally. This makes it really transparent and nice for both parties. They can see what's happening. And oftentimes landlords don't do maintenance not because they're trying to save money, they just forget. You get 5 texts from different tenants and all of a sudden you've just forgotten what you're supposed to do. And if you have a nice online way to track this, it keeps you honest as a landlord, and we find that most landlords want to do that. It's also really helpful in just keeping communication with that renters ongoing. It's especially important for scheduling stuff with contractors, to have an online system where you can track all of this: who's coming in, who's going out, what's it cost. And one thing we also recommend on maintenance, if you can, we're huge advocates for do-it-yourself landlords here, and we still recommend that if you can, some maintenance is still really good to be doing yourself, just to prevent things, and not to run up bills, but this is helpful to prevent them. So, you want to do some sort of 6-month to annual HVAC check, maybe even quarterly, to replace the filters to keep all of your equipment running smoothly, and then it gives you a chance to get in the unit and see things. That's a great way to just keep an eye on things. Of course, now you want to wear masks and be safe, but it's something you can do. You can combine that with some other things like pest control. If you're going in there quarterly to check the HVAC and replace the filters, check under the kitchen cabinets, see if there's any pest problems. If you catch those early, it's so much cheaper than trying to get an exterminator down the road when it's a lot worse damage. Same thing with water damage and leaks. You checking for pests, you'll see if there's water damage, and tightening a drain is 2 seconds of work, but if you've gotten like the wood in the cabinets rotted away because you didn't do that, that's so much harder. I think it's worth doing annually, or at least in between tenants, inspecting and refreshing shower caulking, possibly the grout. Check the roof and gutters to make sure that those aren't going to back up. Those kinds of things save you a ton of money when things break because you weren't looking. If you do have a professional come in to assist with those things, especially now, you want to ensure that they wear a mask and take the necessary precautions. Moving forward, extra precautions for health and safety definitely need to be considered. One thing that I've been doing is providing disposable masks for any contractor that comes in that doesn't have them. Most of them do, but there's always that one-off where they don't. So I keep disposable masks in each of the buildings so that someone can use it. I even sent my tenants masks so that they have them, and explain that if we have contractors coming in and out, these are there for their use. If there are common areas, it's great to place hand sanitizer if you can find some. It's great to place those around so that you're encouraging people to sanitize. And of course, communication in advance for any of these things so that your tenants and the contractors can coordinate appropriately if they think people are going to be home and they want to be extra safe. Okay, so maybe we change direction here and let's just talk about managing money here in this next section. We're not going to go into some of the topics such as financial literacy or where to invest or which markets are performing best. Rather, this section is focused on tactics of how you can better manage your money as it relates to your rental. And really the first thing is I think we talk about automation. If you remember earlier, I mentioned our research suggests that landlords who use a platform that their tenants can pay rent automatically, on average, collect more rent on time. So when possible, you should automate your rent collection as well as tenant notifications and even late fees. Even deposits can be taken online. This makes life easier and uses less paper, but if your tenants are more likely to pay their rent and more likely to pay their rent on time, that's the whole revenue part of your business. And it's super important that you get those things on time so that you can manage any things that you need to pay out because your money's come in on time or early. So automation, although on the surface of it doesn't feel like it's a managing money topic, but it really is. Other kind of simple ways to take your business digital and better manage your money include, getting a bank account for each building you have so that you can better manage operating revenue and expenses in those accounts and tie back to what's excess for one building versus another building. Potentially also great to at least have a specific credit card to all of your rentals. Even better if you have one credit card per building. This really helps you break out by the building, any work that's being done, and you can see which buildings are profitable, which aren't. By having those dedicated bank accounts and credit cards per building, or at least one for your rentals in general, really helps you do your end processing and financials when you have to start thinking about how do you report this to the IRS for tax reporting. Having that all in one place makes it a lot simpler. You just look at your statements online and see money in and money out, at least for your portfolio, but even better if you have it per building. There are some great free tools you can use as a landlord to better manage your money. I should clarify, though, that there are hundreds of tools out there. Some do a lot, some only do one thing. These three tools here, however, do a lot and are simple to use. So that's why we have them here. Of course, the first one, selfishly here, is Avail. Now, I'm the co-founder, so I'm definitely biased, but in my opinion, Avail is a landlord's dream. I started this business to solve my own needs as a landlord, and I feel like the software is doing that. And I feel confident pushing it out to the world, knowing that it satisfies what I'm looking for and does so for another 200,000 landlords using it today. This includes everything from listings, applications, leasing, rent collection, and maintenance, all in one platform, totally free, no matter how many units you have, allows you to manage all the operations of your rental. The second tool is QuickBooks, the QuickBooks mobile app. It's great because it'll connect immediately to your bank account or credit card. And as mentioned before, if you have that, it's a great and accurate way to keep track of your spending habits. It's a great tool for tracking your mileage when you have to drive to places. Really helpful in doing the financial part of owning a rental. And then the last, and certainly not the least, is a tool called Stessa. It's a free tool you can use to monitor the financial performance of your rental portfolio. Super helpful in preparing, kind of your financial statements for your rental and getting a bird's eye view of what's happening. All in all, though, you don't have to get caught up in which tech out there is going to be best for you or any of the latest gadgets. You kind of just want to pick the one or two tools that are going to work best for you, for your needs, and help you become a better landlord. And hopefully you do it in a way where ultimately your tenants are happier and you're able to make more money, or at least spend less time on, cultivating your passive income. The final topic we'll discuss today is, I think, one that gets overlooked a lot, and unfortunately is a huge topic and can be really helpful as a landlord and real estate investor, both for new or beginner landlords, but even more so as you become experienced and you start thinking about how you can give back to the community. I think finding community now is even more important, especially when we're kind of forced to go digital because everything else has been turned away. When you get plugged into a good community of other landlords, investors, that's where you'll find some of the best advice on tough issues and challenges. You may see off-market deals, which are usually much better for you, and you'll certainly see a lot of tips and tricks from those who've been in the game for a long time and are going through the challenges that maybe you're experiencing for the first time. Historically, landlords would attend these in-person associations or realtor groups. There are some local real estate industry meetups, but COVID-19 has definitely shifted this. And so now digital community is more important than ever. Other real estate investors, rental owners may be able to shed light on how they're dealing with similar issues related to their rentals, the vacancies, how they've been impacted by COVID-19 and what they're doing. Now is probably more important than ever to start figuring out community, and even if it has to be digital, and the Avail community is just that for right now. Our forum gives independent rental owners a space to talk about all of these things and share knowledge and come together in a meaningful way. Well, thanks again for watching and listening. I hope everyone got a lot of information out of this. We'll transition over now to some more of the questions and answers. Hopefully we get some really good ones that we can enlighten on. So turn it back over to Rodney. I believe you have some questions you collected from the registration, and then also we'll take some questions from the comments.
Yes, thank you, Lawrence. Awesome webinar. And we did collect some questions ahead of time, but if you have some questions, definitely put them in the comment screen to your right there, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. The first one is, will the webinar be recorded and sent to participants? I apologize, just give us 1 minute. I think we're having a few technical difficulties.
Hey, Ronnie, did you guys lose me? Am I back?
Yes, you're back.
Okay, sorry about that. I put it on mute when you were just asking the first one, and I guess it was the thing was sticking on me. So yeah, short answer, easy one here. It has been recorded, and it is going to be available online, and our team will send out an email with the link to this webinar shortly afterwards.
Awesome. Next question was a really good one. It says, I'm already taking payments through PayPal. Are there any issues with collecting rent with PayPal, or do I have to use an online rent platform?
I mean, PayPal is great for sending money really quickly, and there's certainly a lot of landlords who use it. There's other things like Chase Quick Pay as well and things like that. And those are great. The problem with them is usually if you're collecting rent through them, you're actually violating their terms of service, and at any time they can just kind of shut down your account. You're really not supposed to use those things for business or even the dollar amounts that are being transferred. So you might find some of the limitations being you can't collect the full amount of rent through the platform if there's a maximum amount. You might have your account shut down and those kinds of things. But also, those are really meant to move money of any kind, and they're not really built for kind of the landlord-tenant relationship. So what you won't get out of them is, reminder emails to your tenants or receipts for paying rent. Those things then you'd have to do separately, whereas a dedicated system for rent collection would do those things for you.
Okay, awesome. Next one is a two-part question. What are the best ways to sign up lease digitally, and how does that actually work?
Yeah, great question. Well, the first thing I'll talk about there is just, a lot of landlords that we talk about are fearful that a digital signature isn't valid or legally binding. And so I'll address that quickly. It's actually been valid and legally binding for over 20 years. I think it's something that Bill Clinton signed into law called the e-Sign Act. And all that is required for any digital signature of any kind to be legally binding is that the website can prove the identity of the person, and that once the record has been signed, it can't be edited anymore. So if you're using a system that can explain those things and prove those things out, then that signature is legally binding and enforceable in a court. And the way you would just go about that is simply, on your computer, you'd be viewing a lease, and you would essentially type in your name, maybe some identification information about yourself, maybe your last four of your social, your date of birth, just to meet some of those criteria. And then that's it. You click a button and that acts as the signature. Avail does that for you. Other options out there might be something like HelloSign or DocuSign if you want to take any kind of paper lease, scan it in, and then throw it up on one of those websites and have them sign it. Those are good options as well.
Okay, awesome. The next one says, will there be some pointers for landlords about how to improve process if we're already managing our units digitally pre-COVID? Says we were hoping for additional information on how to make the best virtual tours. Are there any landlords doing pre-applications before showing units in person? It says we're in the Bay Area and all of our tenants already have baseline expectation that everything is done digitally. So we're looking for next level advice on moving even further digitally.
Yeah, I mean, the good news there for anyone who had a really good digital process before the pandemic, you can carry that process through. A lot of that is really good stuff. The question asker mentioned pre-application questions. Those are really important, have always been important, but now even more so because you want to qualify or disqualify applicants before you have to spend a lot of time and effort moving forward in the process. And certainly now, if you don't have to put you or your tenants or the applicants at risk by doing a showing in person through that pre-application questions, then you would want to do that. So, the short answer there is, like, if you've been doing a digital process, you should maintain that process and adding into it the layer of safety. I don't know that there's pro tips. Being a digital landlord had already set us up for success during this time period.
Okay. And the next question is probably one of the biggest questions on a lot of investors' minds. It says a lot of people, especially renters, are losing their jobs because of COVID-19. How do we protect ourselves?
Yeah, that's tough. And what's scary about it too is, a lot of renters and the media don't understand the landlord's perspective either. I think there's, tenants are definitely suffering. They're losing their jobs. They're not able to pay, but most landlords are in that same situation as well. Most landlords are, they work somewhere full time and they're part-time landlords. And a lot of those people have also lost their jobs. And, now they're not getting rent and they've lost their job. They're not getting their normal income. And so it's affecting everybody. And so I think the only way to protect yourself is to have open lines of communication with your tenants and be checking in on them. If they can't pay, hiding and not communicating with them isn't going to change that. But at least if you're talking with them, you'll have some amount of weeks of notice so that you can do something about it, whether that's talking with your bank about mortgage relief or, trying to get a line of credit, at least to cover some stuff short term. That communication is really important. And if you can work out a deal or negotiate with your tenants to maybe go into installments or something like that, that could at least keep both of you afloat for a short period of time. One other thing that early on we recommended to our customers were if their tenant's unable to pay the rent, let them pay with their credit card, at least in the short term. So some sort of online system. However, obviously credit cards have tremendous fees with them. So what we encouraged our landlords to do was either split or completely cover the financing charges on those credit cards. So, if the tenant's paying something like $1,000 rent, maybe reduce the rent by $100 so that, with the credit card, it's back to $1,000, but the tenant's not having to go above and beyond what they would normally pay. That at least gets both of you past some small hurdle and doesn't put financing risk on you and gives you the tenant something. So, but any of those cases have to be one-on-one with your tenants at this point. That's the only way. There's no true protection.
Okay. And this is also a two-part. What repairs should we be considering for our units as we enter the late summer months? And what should we hold off on for during COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, certainly anything that's outdoors is fair game for right now. I'm not necessarily encouraging landlords to go out there and just do maintenance if there's not issues that have come up, but there are some preventive things that are really worth doing, depending the location of the property. For me, I think it's gutters. If we're about to enter the fall, all leaves and stuff are going to start clogging those gutters. So that's a good time to look at those. Good time to start looking at, the AC and furnace, getting those inspected, changing the filters on those. All of those are good preventive maintenance things I think that you can tackle now. And most of them, you're spending the time outside as opposed to in their unit. So I focus on those things. And then obviously as tenants have needs, address those. That you can't really, if a toilet breaks, you can't wait on that. You still have to provide a habitable environment for them. So as those come up, do them, and otherwise preventive maintenance things are still fair game.
Yeah, and these are some great questions. I have another two-parter for you. What state and federal liabilities does a landlord have when showing a property? And then it says, do they know or can they ask if a landlord has contracted or if they know whether or not they have COVID-19?
Yeah, it'll be difficult for me to go into each state because they're all different, and so are some of the major cities. On a federal level, there's a bunch of fair housing laws that you have to be aware of as you're showing properties. And I don't know if this is urban legend or if this was true, but 10 or so years ago, there was a leasing agent who was showing a rental property, and they showed units that were in the front of the building that were very easily accessible to folks who were handicapped or in wheelchairs, and they would only show units in the back, away from traffic and by the kind of the gardens to people who had families with young kids. And although the intentions were good, that violated fair housing laws because you have to treat everybody equally. And so I think they lost their license and those kinds of things. So you still have to obey, fair housing laws as you're doing showings. And that extends into how you screen applicants. If you've got a process where you require a credit report or criminal history for one applicant, you need to extend that to every applicant so that you don't get in trouble. So just be careful with those things. As far as COVID, there are some privacy concerns that landlords should have. I don't know for sure if there's a federal or state law preventing you from asking your tenant if they've contracted COVID. But there are some privacy concerns around healthcare in general and health in general that it's not really appropriate for landlords to ask a tenant about their health situation. And so that's just best avoided for now. And then practice just good, safe means, wear a mask, keep distant, use hand sanitizer, all the things everyone's recommending. And then you'd hope that if the tenant knew that they had COVID, that they would be quarantining themselves at home. And I think now we just have to have good faith that people are doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly right. So next question up, it says, is there an MLS waiver form people must sign before a landlord can show the property?
Honestly, I don't know that I have a good answer to that one. We don't actually, at Avail, we don't really go through the MLS. We instead, we syndicate to a lot more public places like Zillow or Trulia, are places where you don't need a license for those things. So I don't know. I don't actually have a good answer for that. Maybe we can follow up on that.
Definitely. And then what is the requirement for PPE during showings?
Well, that's going to, again, depend on the city and state, and what they're willing to do. Here in Chicago's reopened up a bit. So there was a period where there was a lockdown, and then after the lockdown, there were some requirements on distancing and those things, and those have been laxed a bit. So it's really going to depend on where you're located. And so you might want to look into that. But if you're just trying to be safe and keep your tenants safe, you probably want to do more than what the city or state is recommending. And I think it's fair to have a mask with you if you're going into the unit, have some available for your tenants, or require or ask that your tenants wear them too if you're going into their unit, or all contractors that are coming in and out wear those masks. I'd say the same thing is true of hand sanitizer. And then just keep that 6 feet at distance if you can. And despite what some of the cities and states are showing, I think those are some of the minimums we can do until it's a more known and safe environment.
All right, and I think we have time for one last question. What are the best ways to keep my tenants happy during the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, two things. One, just kind of leave them alone, right? The same thing that was true before the pandemic. They're just wanting to live their lives and going about those things. So that's the first thing. Just let them continue living their lives. The second thing is, being flexible with them and chatting with them. If you don't know if your tenants have lost their jobs or not, that's the first step. Check in and ask if they're okay. I know that a lot of landlords are fearful that if we do that, then all of a sudden our tenants are going to say, no, I'm not okay. I can't pay rent. But whether we ask or not is not going to change their ability to pay rent. At least we can just get ahead of it. So, open those lines of communication. Don't be afraid to talk to tenants. We had done a survey in March and April, and it was clear from the response we got from tenants. I think there were nearly 10,000 responses. Tenants want to pay. If they feel like they have a way not to, they're not taking it. They want to pay. They want to meet their obligations. The only time they're not is when they can't. And so we don't have to be fearful of that communication. They're human beings. We're human beings. I think we've got to do the right thing.
Awesome. Well, that's all our time today. Lawrence, thank you so much for everything. And a huge thank you to Avail for putting this on today. If you haven't checked out Avail, definitely check them out at avail.co. They are an amazing company. They're a company that really, truly cares about you as an investor and wants you to help you succeed. So definitely check them out. We look forward to doing some more webinars in the future, and have a great day.
Thanks, Rodney.